hunger training. What is it? It's an idea about mindful eating, intuitive eating. And I hear a lot of nutritionists, and even when we're told, okay, let's encourage clients to be mindful eaters. Well, that's great. But how do we do that? Do we just suddenly go meditate and then listen and say, yeah, I feel full? And the Japanese have a saying, eat till about 70%. But how can we, from a scientific basis, model the levels when our blood sugar goes down and know that we're in the zone that is more a utilization, using our own fuel, a healing zone, and without obviously raising blood sugar and doing all the things that goes along with raising blood sugar and all the problems we have. So hunger training came out of this concept. And initially said here, we're using blood sugar to now get a connection. So when we're thinking about, okay, how hungry am I? Is there a way that I can get an idea from a data perspective to correlate? I'm this hungry, this is my blood sugar. So it's using hunger training, and I'll talk about the booklet later, but using the concept of hunger training to understand the cues of hunger and related to blood sugar. And like I said, when we enter that zone, and I'll talk more about it, that zone, especially below that 85, then we're into this sweet spot where we're using our own fuel, where we're potentially into a autophagy situation, but basically we're able to manage and stabilize our blood sugar. And I always say, the more stable your blood sugar, the more balanced it is, the better our life is. The reduction of diseases, the more energy we have, the greater feeling that we get from it. So by measuring your blood glucose before eating the meal and ensuring then, like I said, those meals are basically we get feedback from it. So I often hear in talks, or people even at a restaurant, if I'm sitting down with them, and they say, Craig, is that a good meal? And I'm like, okay, well, it looks whole. That's a good start. I see some protein. I see some vegetables. I see some carbohydrates, probably fat in there. It looks okay. But is that right for that person? In the previous webinars, we've talked about, and it's specifically when I thought about this, we talked about how the gut influences so much, and especially we know today influences our blood sugar. One person who eats a piece of sourdough bread spikes to the roof when the glycemic index is like a medium. Other person, not a problem. One person who eats a low carbohydrate diet lowers their blood sugar, everything feels great. The other person, it's a disaster. Like eating low carb for them messes their blood sugar and even can rise it out of stress, out of cortisol. So the only way that we can really become mindful eaters is by getting feedback. And this is all it is. It's how do I get feedback from a device, whether it's plugged on for a constant glucose meter or using a blood sugar meter, along with my own sensations. And if I can put the two together and I can really start tuning in, then I'm getting somewhere. Then that becomes, from my mind, intuitive and mindful eating. So we measure it before we eat. We guess how hungry are we, and then we get that second feedback. That's essentially the concept, but that's the overview now. I'm going to go through it a little bit deeper. I want to also just quickly talk about the studies. I won't go into too much detail, but basically this transformed my work, my practice. I suddenly went from more generalization. I'd already started looking at blood tests. I'd already started seeing, okay, you've got high HbA1c, long-term blood sugar. We should try to do this. You have inflammatory markers. We should try to do this. Your hormones are doing this. Let's try this. But they still had a generalization amount. And then the more I started getting into it and understanding blood sugar and then looking at these studies and going, wow, that's where we need to go. Do I do this with every client? No. Some who are finding their way are doing very well with this, and we might focus on other issues directly first, focus on the gut, focus on reducing inflammation. But looking at blood sugar, as I said, is an absolute foundation to health. So this study came out in 2006. It was an Italian study. They had an idea. how much is hunger related to blood sugar. So that was their experiment. Is physiological hunger, the cues, the signs of hunger, directly related to your blood sugar levels? And then the second part is, could we train people to predict their blood sugar based on their hunger? That's that intuitive part. Both, yes, both got a tick. Both were in the end saying, yes, physiological hunger is related in most cases, I'll say, not all cases, but in most cases to blood sugar levels, and people can get quite accurate. This study here, they talked about people within 3 weeks getting within 10% accuracy. I've seen it myself at a few of the centers I work at where people are really starting to fine tune and understand, wow, that's close. So I'll say, okay, how hungry? And they'll say, oh, I'm a 7 out of 10 hungry. And they end up being about 85, 90 and starting to work that number. But again, we'll go through it. But what they showed was that there is a basis for hunger, blood sugar. And this study then became future studies. They replicated in New Zealand, found the same results in the other countries. So it became a real benchmark for using this strategy of hunger training. So we're going to talk about the basics. We'll go through the benefits, how to train it, the most important, and then I'm going to go through some of the common questions, which essentially is a summary of this talk. Okay, so what is hunger? Physiological hunger. Now we have physiological and psychological. This becomes the problem. When we're connected with the physiological and when the psychological isn't overriding it, then it becomes easier. I'm hungry, my blood sugar is lower. So what does that hunger feel like? They describe something called an empty, hollow sensation. Okay, basically it's the hunger pangs, that feeling like, oh my God, I'm really hungry right now. And part of it is related to, for your digestive system, when your body is clearing food. And they'll talk about, obviously here it's written the stomach and the small intestine. When we've cleared the food, basically this hollow, now our gut is emptier, and the receptors, the signalers will say, oh, wow, okay, we're empty. I think we need to eat again soon. And with that, as we lower or empty that stomach, we empty the contents, the blood sugar has risen because of it. Now we're potentially, blood sugar is going to start falling, and we'll be looking for, okay, let's look at our own sources of fuel, or let's look at an outside source of fuel. So that was the first, the empty, hollow sensation. The second was that physical sensation, which many, especially females, experienced, where it was lightheadedness, that when blood sugar goes down. I do notice, not always, but a slight difference between men and women in terms of this, where if I see a female's blood sugar getting at that, like down to the low 70s and 70, their lightheadedness, they'll describe it as often stronger. I had a guy at Action Point a little while ago who was on a radical, not recommended style of training and eating. Basically, he's consuming, I think he was consuming less than 1,000 calories, but doing like 4 or 5 hours of training for the day. And he saw my talk and he came up and he said, oh, can I do that too? And I said, yeah, sure. And I didn't ask him any of the questions. He just went, we did his blood sugar and it was 56 or something. And I was like, whoa, do you feel all right? Are you weak, hungry? What's going on? He said, yeah, I feel a little bit weak and yeah, I'm a bit hungry. And then he told me that he's on like a massive deficit. He's lost this much weight. And I said to him, look, this isn't healthy. It's not good for the body. We'll talk more about that. But when your blood sugar goes too low, cortisol will really start to save you. Low blood sugar is not fueling the cells and it's dangerous. And in his psychology, he was overriding a lot. Hey, I'm losing weight, I'm doing this. But when he finally realized, and when I explained it, he said days later, I started eating, increasing, I felt so much better. So there is this psychological element that I want to bring into it. It can override the physiological, but if we are as clear as possible with stress, we're focused on ourselves, then hopefully we get those signals. But those two signals, empty, hollow, so the gut, hunger, that actual hunger, and then the other ones are lightheadedness, fatigue, weakness in the body, that it needs to raise blood sugar. So what are the reference ranges? And I will say, I'm going to talk in a moment about the book that I've created, and this is in there. So no one needs to take notes or write this down. But the standard reference ranges I spoke about last week are 70 to 100 in terms of normal fasted blood sugar. And we often talked about fasting being over 8 hours. I'm going to talk about fasting essentially being a couple of hours after eating. Okay, that's what I want to see a person actually get in that optimal. What's that? 70 to 85, and that's should say there milligrams per deciliter. But the other range is the international unit. So in Thailand, we use the US, which is the 70 to 85, and in the Europe, Australia, using 3.9 to 4.7. To get the figure, it's a divide or times by 18. So 70 divided by 18 leads to that 3.9. Normal, 70 to 100. And then we have pre-diabetes and then diabetes over that 126. Some labs 140, but generally 126. So that is essentially before eating. And when what I'm recommending people do is before they have a meal, they measure their blood sugar, and I'll show you the chart that I've created. They listen to their hunger signals, and the more you do it, the first time you're like, I'm not sure how hungry I am and how this is related. I'm guessing blood sugar. But you start testing before the meal, and then 2 hours later, 90 minutes to 2 hours, testing after the meal. Now, the American Diabetes Association says, okay, if your blood sugar is like less than 100, and I think even like these markers here, like less than 200 2 hours after eating, then okay, you might be pre-diabetic. If it's under 140, everything's great. I'm like, 140, it's way too high. That means insulin is working so hard, and it's probably resistant at that stage. I want a person 2 hours after eating to be as close to that pre as possible. Then I know insulin is working really well, and that meal was a really safe, solid, stable blood sugar meal. So it's really important that this is the difference when we look at what the general is, what the norm is, versus actually what optimizes people. So I definitely, if your blood sugar was prior to eating at 75, then I'd love to see it definitely. I'd love to see it back at 80, 75, 80 or 85. And that will show, wow, insulin's working great, but at least under that 90 mark. So again, this is in my booklet. What are some of the impacts? So this slide talks about the impacts of behavioral eating. How does it improve us? Well, first, obviously, it improves us by having lower blood sugar because of that awareness. So in terms of us making choices, it gives us a chance to see, I eat this or I do these things because it's not just about what you eat, which I'm going to talk about in a moment. It's also based on stress levels, based on exercise, based on certain variables related to how we live each day. But if I take advantage of this, studies will show that people will make better choices. It's hard to keep dismissing if you're using the blood sugar meter regularly and you're like, that meal, I'm still over 120, 130. It really allows you that awareness to then make a decision. And most people, if they're focused on restoring health or optimizing health, then they'll say, well, I have to change something. So it gives you that awareness. Increased physical eating, increased eating for physical hunger. So I often talk about the needs of food. For my mind, 80, 90% should be about nourishment. It should be about feeding the cell. The cell, remember, needs fuel and nutrients. It should be about that first to give us energy, because for my mind, energy is the first and most important thing when it comes to our health. There is an emotional component to eating. Most of us have experiences. I like that emotion to be more I'm trying this food because the taste buds, I'm going to enjoy this sensation. The problem we see today is a lot of people eating not out of hunger, but because it fills a gap. It helps with dopamine, or it helps with one of those neurotransmitters to make us feel better. I've eaten, now I feel calm. I've eaten, now I feel just relaxed. I feel that feeling in there. I'm using food to just escape from the world. So we want a physical sensation to be the majority, or that physical hunger to be that driver. But the emotion I like is around the social and the sensations, all those things. Food can serve that purpose and support emotional well-being and support from a social perspective. We're enjoying food with everyone. But the problem is when it becomes a negative, when it becomes, I need food, I crave sugar, I crave this food, I need more, I can't stop. Obviously, we see a lot of that today. So blood sugar training, hunger training really helps give a person that awareness. So it reduces some of that emotional eating. And for some people gives like the restraint. It says to, whoa, slow down. Your blood sugar's too high. Yeah, you've got enough fuel in the tank. Let's just put the rest away. Or let's next time not eat as much or fill the plate as much, or the type of foods. So it basically creates more mindfulness, creates less impulsive eating. And this is what we want. We want that distance from a person who was previously saying, I'm an emotional eater, I'm impulsive, for them to have that time, that gap, to now become more aware and then fine tune to say, what does my body need? That's then the next powerful step. So as I said, the other part is the studies are actually on hunger training pretty impressive for someone who would like to lose body fat. Now, they measure it as weight loss. Let's talk about weight. What is it? Muscle, water, fat. But there is a clear, in my experience also, this weight loss is a change in shape. It's a change in body composition, and it's a move in the right direction. This was out of, I think, New Zealand, where they extended. They did it for 1 year. They had really good compliance with it, but they ended up using the 6-month data to show that. And you can see now what it basically says is on the vertical column, it's the weight change, basically how much weight did they lose starting this, and underneath is the entries, how many times they wrote in their diary and did the actual work. And we understand the more work you do, the more effort you put into it, the better a result. But that's essentially what it's saying. And that's what I'm trying to really reinforce here. If someone really is committed to balancing their blood sugar and getting all the benefits, weight loss, energy stability, mental stability, prevention of diseases, whether it's cancer, heart disease, obviously all the diabetes and metabolic things I talked about in the last webinar. The person wants that putting in the work and regularly testing. And we see those 3 columns. Those who only did 0 to 30 entries, some of them no results, some of them gained weight. Some of them we see over like 5 kilos gain in that 6 months. Many, like a good half, were a weight gain. Then we go to the next group that was 31 to 60 entries out of that 6 months. And out of them who did for each day an entry, they had a marked, and you can see that generally it's nearly at the -5. So maybe that would be a -3 on average. The third group did over 60 entries. And you can see at the very bottom, those 2 markers, they're getting over 15 kilos weight loss. They really must have been like going for it. And maybe that, and again, what it didn't show as much was how much, and it was based on averages. So they tried to divide and be more controlled, but the data was clear. There was a general consensus, and it makes sense. But the message here is very clear. You do the work, you'll get a greater result. So what is the work? What do we do? How do we do it? Here's a chart in the booklet. So on the left-hand side, you'll see a cover, Mastering Blood Sugar, the Biohacker's Guide. This is an ebook I created, which I'll be posting into the website. It has all this information that I want you to go through it, look it over. Parts of it, it starts also with blood tests you can put in, but it goes a little bit into the background, but then it goes through, and this chart is in the booklet, plus future charts I'll talk about in a moment. Here's what we do. We're feeling hungry, and we've got the hunger pangs, a little bit lightheaded, a little bit weakness. We're thinking, I'm ready to eat now. I'm going to eat. So we look at our food diary, which I'm going to, the entry, and I'll show you that in a moment. We record the hunger. We record the score. We take our blood sugar, and we might be like, oh, okay, I'm 85 or I'm 75. I record it down. And then I ask myself this question. If the reading is above 85, say we're sitting at 95, we have two choices. We can extend the fast. So I often say 1 to 2 hours. And what should happen is the blood sugar should go down. If the blood sugar goes up or stays the same, then it looks like maybe cortisol is playing a role. And I'm going to talk about that just in a moment, how to deal with cortisol, because it does affect quite a few people. But you have a decision. You could extend 1 or 2 hours and retest. Or if you were feeling, I'm really hungry, my hunger pangs from a 0, not hungry, to 10, ravenous, I feel like an 8 or a 9, I really need to eat. I'm going to have the things that balance blood sugar the best: protein, vegetables, fiber. Okay, so I'm going to have a dish, have a plate with some protein, some vegetables, or I'm going to just hold off. Either way, I want a person then, if you delayed it for 2 hours, record again, test it again, test the blood sugar, see how you're feeling. If you ate, you're going to record that too and see what did that meal do. And oftentimes what I'll notice, especially, and I'll talk about breakfast, is that because cortisol spikes in the morning, I get a lot of people who have high blood sugar in the morning. And this is why in the booklet I say it, but I'll say it again now. I don't recommend at the start testing the first, so the waking blood sugar before breakfast. Not at the start, because we have this dawn phenomenon that raises your cortisol, and what it can mean is that a person's like, oh my God, I'm sitting at 9,500. I have to extend it, when those people actually I recommend eating. So for most people, I do recommend today, especially women who are more sensitive to cortisol, to have that breakfast and then compare. I've had many clients who have done intermittent fasting, skipping breakfast. Blood sugar's remained right elevated at 95, 100. And as soon as they eat, I've looked at it and it's gone, whoa, they've checked their monitor, whether it was manual or CGM, and basic, so a constant glucose meter, and it's come right down. Why? Because cortisol said, you've eaten, I'm happy, I'll bring it, I'm allowed to let it, I'll back off with cortisol now, and blood sugar will go down. So that's the kind of that side. The red side of the column is, if it's above the two choices, I delay or I focus more on protein and vegetables, but I still test afterwards. And the green is, it's below 85, you're in the zone. The zone meaning between 70 to 85, I don't like it going below 70, but 70 to 85, you are in this zone that is for losing body fat, where you use your own stores, where your blood sugar is more stable, where you're potentially in a slight autophagy, depending on how long it's extended, meaning autophagy, the cleaning up of cells, unfolding proteins, redoing things, healing the gut, reducing the inflammation, all those things by having the blood sugar at that level. Your body says, okay, I'm low, I'm below this mark, I can eat now. Person eats, records the meal afterwards. Okay, so page 9 of the booklet, I just took this snapshot for the next 2 slides, but basically I talk about, for those who haven't done this, many of you have done this before, you can dive straight in. But I often say at the start, if you want to just do a warm-up, you might, for 3 days, eat a little bit lower calorie if you're concerned that your blood sugar is on the higher side. So if you think, wow, I've tested it, my blood sugar is in the range, then move right ahead, go get into it. But if it was on the higher side, instead of getting frustrated, you might spend the next 3 days lowering the carbohydrates, reduce the portion no more than 10, so the size of the meals, 10, 20%, focus on protein, vegetables, some fats in there. And then after that 3 days, now begin, okay? Just so you don't have to test. I often say, okay, you were sitting at 95, 100 or above that. Let's see what happens. Let's see how you go. And some people, I might extend that 3 days, might be, let's do it for 2 weeks, or let's do it for longer. I don't want you to feel too concerned, but you might just do it to see how the blood sugar goes down. However, if you're seeing now that blood sugar at 85 or below, we're in the game now. Let's start playing. Let's start testing it before and after meals and see, obviously, how foods affect you. And let's start tuning in to how the body responds when it's hungry. So we can start saying, okay, 85 feels like this. That's what the hunger training is saying. What does that feeling on the blood glucose meter? Do it often, do it frequently, and you won't need the blood sugar meter after a certain time. I still use mine occasionally, still to reset. If I do fasting, and I'll talk about that in a moment, that if I see fasting, my blood sugar go up, then I usually use it. That's it. I'll cut the fast because now cortisol is kicking in. The other part is, okay, so what do I do if I went to the red side and the blood sugar was higher? I said you had a choice. You could eat protein and vegetables, which are the lowest in terms of, generally speaking, for most people for spiking blood sugar. So the refined carbohydrates generally do the highest, but then some of the just whole grains, if it was whole grain bread or cereal or potatoes, they will generally raise the blood sugar higher than the other protein and fiber. But the other things you could do if you say, well, I want to delay it. Bit hungry, but I'll delay it. So you keep busy, you drink a lot of water. Some people, they're thirsty, not hungry. So this is where we want to start getting a gauge. I've filled up in terms of water. My hunger cues have come right down. Okay, that's interesting. Maybe a lot of times when I feel like I have to eat every 2 hours, maybe I'm dehydrated. And I see that often too. Person might go for a walk. And actually walking, often for a lot of people, they make chest before and after walk. They go, wow, my blood sugar really came down. But when I do exercise, I go out and do a jog or Zumba, I notice my blood sugar stays elevated. And that's something that I see. And I'll talk in the next slides. Anything that is parasympathetic, what does that mean? Sympathetic, fight or flight, cortisol. And remember, cortisol's job is to raise your blood sugar, plain and simple. So we want to wind cortisol down. We want to relax it. So what we do is we go, okay, well, let's listen to some music. Let's read a book. Let's relax. If we have listened to a friend or phone a friend who's going to relax you. If doing a chore kind of distracts and relaxes you too, then great. So you occupy yourself, ideally not with super stressful things to get cortisol going. And then you retest. Okay, so you've just extended it. But what if it's not coming down? What if it stays above that 85? Had someone just recently sent me a message and said, Craig, they sent me on the phone, it's not going down. It's consistently above the 85, towards 90 and above. Sadly, then cortisol's probably playing a role here. And so cortisol keeps pushing blood sugar up and will want you also to eat more sugar. So how do we deal with cortisol then? We've got to ask ourselves where it's coming from. Is it a mental, emotional stress in the moment, or is it something that's been cumulative, chronic, been suffering chronic emotional, mental stress? How do I deal with that? Well, doing your best. I posted a video in the early, if you haven't seen it, I totally recommend it for everybody. It's a TED Talk, and it was at one of the first posts when I started this group. That's how important it was for me. It was basically one, and it was from Heart Math. So you could even Google Heart Math TED Talk, and it described the value or how quickly when you tune into your heart, meaning when you go to a place of love, gratitude, joy, feeling calm, feeling a good, happy space, cortisol comes right down. So that we have a lot of power over this. So sometimes it's getting out of situations. Sometimes it's just giving yourself a little bit of space, a few minutes, and what we see, it can happen very quickly. Gratitude, love, those sort of things. That's why sometimes music, if it's good music or a book, something that relaxes you, start doing more, as much of that as possible. If you had just been training, and I see this happening a lot when people go out to centers and they do a lot of training and their blood sugar doesn't go down. Had a young man, he wanted to do the CrossFits and wanted to do the morning intense classes. And I said to him, look, you see what your blood sugar is doing. Your goal was to reduce your blood sugar, get away from diabetes. I recommend slow weight training, walking, not these yet. Just hold off And fortunately, he did that and he saw the difference. Blood sugar went down. So watch overtraining. Had one girl, yoga teacher, whose blood sugar was constantly, like, it was high, and she was clearly under eating, low calorie, and she was doing Zumba. And the Zumba was pushing it to like 140, 160. And I'm like, that's kind of medium intensity, long duration, 90 minutes of dancing is not working for you. So we can use the blood sugar meter to get this assessment to cortisol, which is very powerful. If you slept the night before badly, yes, it will affect cortisol. It will, your body is under that fight or flight. So what you want to do is you want to do as much mindfulness meditation as possible. Infections, I've seen many people who have high raised blood sugar. I've seen an extreme case with meningitis with a friend of mine who's a trainer, and his blood sugar was through the roof. No training, guy was super fit, but infections will increase the fight or flight response. So you want to really take stock. If that blood sugar is not coming down, you have to look at all the stress in your world. What does that all stress look like? Well, here's some of the things here. I love this picture. These little adrenal glands that sit above the kidneys, and all the parts that all of us, unless we're a monk in a cave, dealing with on a regular basis, whether it goes from life issues for finances or emotional stress, death, separation from people, fear, psychological, lifestyle of the smoking, lack of relaxation, poor eating habits. I'm going around the other way. Sugar, caffeine, coffee, the stimulants, constantly stimulating things. Lack of good food, so not enough nutrient-dense food. And obviously in that top right corner, infections. I see infections and chronic infections in people throwing their blood sugar. Plus, along with that, what people often take in terms of prescription drugs, things like that. So you want to take stock, stand back from it, and really try to be honest with yourself and say, okay, blood sugar is not going down. Is it a food dietary thing? Or is it one of these? Is it a sleep issue, a mental, emotional issue, psychological issue, relationship issue? What is causing my body to be in fight or flight and making my blood sugar be as high as possible so I can run and fight? How do I tell my body it's okay, you don't need to fight right now? Blood sugar can come down. What do I need? Do I need meditation, relaxation, sitting on a beach, walking in nature, listening to music, focusing on sleep, having a conversation with someone who may have hurt you, or any of those things, really kind of going through that and asking yourself, what do I need to do? So this is the diary that's in the booklet. Basically, you put the date, you put the time, you ask yourself from 0, not hungry, to 10, super hungry, where am I? Often the first time, like, you'll get that fine-tuned as you go. You do a prediction. Now, this one, you're like, first time's doing it, it's like, I have no idea. After about 3 goes, just start having a guess. Okay, I remember I felt this hungry. It was about 90. Okay, let's guess. Start tuning into that. It's incredible when people do this often, how good they get. Measure the blood sugar. Okay, what was the actual one? Then go eat, unless you're extending it. So if you have eaten, then put that in. And eating, obviously, prior, if there was any notes, or you're about to go eat now, putting it in. So what you might have is, before the meal, I had so my hunger might have been, let's say it was 8 out of 10. My blood sugar prediction, I felt pretty hungry. If it's an 8, so it's like 70, let's say 75. I measured it, it was 80. I'm like, okay. I had the meal prior to that. I wrote that down. I wrote any notes if it was high, or if there was a sleep or stress issue. And then I eat my meal, and 2 hours later I test it. So I go through again. I say how hungry I am after the meal. Okay, I've just eaten. I should be quite hungry. Quite full, quite satisfied if the meal was good. What was my prediction? Predict it, measure it. What was that meal that I just had 2 hours ago? So in between those, and do I notice, is there anything observations-wise? You might say something about the food. Oh, as a reminder on the side even, you might say, okay, that was, I think, too many carbohydrates. Next time I'm going to bring that down. But you're trying to find your formula. I often talk about this. Everybody has a different formula. I've met many people who their blood sugar goes against, oh, wow, to balance your blood sugar, you need more carbohydrates. I've seen those people. Other people, it's like, no, you bring your carbohydrates down. Amount of protein. Some people having too much protein, they didn't feel well. But most people, again, increasing protein does the job. Fiber, all those things, you want to look at that and start finding observations for your own individuality, based a lot on your microbiome and genetics, things like that. So let me summarize now, wrap up. So how does hunger training regulate eating behavior? It brings awareness. You start taking a mindful, a conscious, not just trying to hope that you get this idea based on something outside, but you're starting from a science, a data perspective, that you can start connecting. This is how hungry I am. This is what score. This is in terms of blood sugar. I want to be under that 85, between 70 to 85, this nice sweet spot. What do I need to do? So by doing that, looking at the blood sugar meters, looking at the blood sugar meter before and after meals, now I've got a sense of saying, and not needing a nutritionist to say, oh, eat this. You can say, wow, that meal took me from 80, 2 hours later, back to 85. Perfect. Insulin worked well. Everything's great. Differences between individuals. The studies show that very clearly. This first one is about doing the work. Those who do the work get the results. So over the next month, I'm really encouraging people to put in the time. You're learning a skill. If you learn this skill, it is a life skill. I can't say this enough. You learn this skill, it sticks with you. A lot of it. You might come back to it occasionally like I do, check your blood sugar, but it sticks with you. I'm so passionate about this sort of work because I've seen such differences. How does it influence intuitive eating? It connects this device with your feeling. Instead of kind of hoping, okay, am I hungry? Am I not? Now you have this connection, and it's very powerful. So this then will reduce, hopefully, where a person has that space now. My blood sugar is 100. I'm hungry. What's going on? In the past, I've seen it at 85. Wow, I'm really stressed. Okay, what do I need to do? Or, okay, what in terms of emotional work, what other aspects, or wow, that meal before wasn't the right one. Some of the challenges, I think one of the biggest challenges is doing it, to be consistent with that. Just like anything in life, being consistent, doing the work is you got to put in the time. And so that is challenging. And to just dedicate yourself over this next month, hopefully you can overcome that. Sometimes it can be a little bit uncomfortable, like just trying to get it in the right position, and it requires you work to write things down. But I find when people do put the effort in, like I said, they'll realize, wow, it was so worth it. Can it be adapted for someone who experiences frequent low or high blood sugar swings? Absolutely. So I haven't talked that much yet, and I will now, about low blood sugar. Low blood sugar is a real problem. As I said, for that gentleman, it was too low. He was smashing cortisol, and he was going to, I said to him, you're going to, and sadly, I have a very strong feeling you're going to rebound later. The amount of training you're doing, okay, if you were doing fasting, but relaxed fasting, doing breathing, yoga, very relaxed things, then, okay, it's probably a beneficial thing. But because you're smashing your body and malnourishing it, it's going to rebound. So low blood sugar is a problem. That's why there are 4 hormones looking after the bottom. There's glucagon, the main one, opposite insulin. There's cortisol, there's adrenaline, there's a growth hormone. The body does not want low blood sugar because that means the cell is starving. Cells start getting starved, cells die. In the end, no food, blood sugar goes to the thing, we enter a coma. That's why, sadly, insulin is used as a way to commit suicide. Puts a person in an induced coma. So blood sugar goes too low, we have a problem. For those using the CGMs, I will say, often overnight, they make mistakes. Suddenly a person says, oh my God, my blood sugar went to 20. There's a problem. You may not have woken up if you got that blood sugar that low. So treat that with a, sometimes I've seen a few people where it's gone quite low. So these machines they're not perfect. I use a manual, but the CGMs are more convenient if you can access it. In Asia, we struggle to get them except for Singapore. But Australia, Europe, the one that I recommend, I put into the previous Facebook post, the Freestyle Libra from Abbott. They are the classical one. There's Dexcom, which is more the diabetes crowd uses, but they're about 100 Aussie dollars or 50 quid for one of those that lasts for 2 weeks. If you want to look at the previous post. For the manual ones, for those in Thailand, I've put a link to the one I use in Thailand. I like it. It's been very reliable. Okay, in what ways does consistent hunger training support long-term weight loss compared to traditional calorie counting? So I'm taught to prescribe calories. That's how most nutritionists, dietitians are taught. The problem is not all calories are the same. Not all calories, by simply reducing calories, and I've seen this time again, especially with women over 40. Low calorie does not mean low reduction in body fat. It can mean on a scale going down, but often it's muscle. We know that the more stress, cortisol that a person produces during the day, the more tissue, muscle tissue, will be used for energy overnight. So we have to be careful. Going too much of a deficit and asking too much of a demand leads to lower metabolic rate. That is a problem. So we need to find the right balance. Blood sugar can help this. Hunger training can support naturally long-term blood sugar. See that you're not going too low. See that you're not going too high, causing all the problems when we have high blood sugar. Like I said, the metabolic syndromes, the other issues from cancer, heart disease, just about most of the diseases today have a metabolic aspect. But if we can keep it in that zone as long and often and frequent as possible, we're going to be in what I call this utilization, this potential healing zone, this stabilization. Great for the brain, great for the physiology, great for energy. Sustained energy instead of going up and down like a yo-yo, to have that constant energy. So this is the talk for today. I'll open to the guys here any questions, but what I'll be doing over the next week is adding some posts. You'll see the booklet will be in there. Please download it. Please take certain sections. You might just copy out some of the sections in there, like the chart, or that was what do I do, that flow chart, and the table where you fill out. You might just put it in a booklet yourself. Just say, okay, that's fine. I'll use those columns. I just really hope people take advantage of this and see the benefits of this. It'll be in the recording, so obviously if someone, in terms of when they come back to it, that's up to them too. But I hope it can really play a powerful role in most people, just to get an understanding. So with that in mind, I will stop the recording, and thank you for watching. And any hanging around can ask any questions.